Hello guys and welcome back to our 7th episode of the guided playthrough of Satisfactory 1.0. Having set up the train line in the last episode, today we're going to be hopefully unlocking the signals so that we can add more than one train to the track. But in order to do that, we are going to have to produce computers. So the first thing that we're going to be doing in this episode is unlock industrial manufacturing, and more importantly, the manufacturer, so that we can build a computer factory, which we'll be doing at our little oil facility over here. And with our second cameraman, we're going to be able to show you the whole layout of the factory. But before we get started, let's go over everything that we did briefly in the last episode to bring you up to speed in case you missed that, followed by what we're covering in today's video so you can use the timestamps below. Obviously, the main thing that we did was unlock trains, and we covered how to set up a basic train timetable. More importantly, we talked about the use cases for trains and how to set up, using blueprints, a railway setup. And finally, we covered how to transport goods between factories. But with that out of the way, let's see what we're going to cover. For today's video, we have 4 important things to cover. The first one is going to be push-pull trains and how to set them up, because we're going to connect resources between the oil facility and the copper extraction. We're also going to cover computer production, that's the whole setting up of the factory, as well as connecting those computers to storage, and then finally signaling so that we can use multiple trains on a single network. Let's get to it. Starting off, we are going to be unlocking the industrial manufacturing. That's going to unlock the manufacturer for us, which we need in order to produce computers, and then onto heavy modular frames. Now, these are actually the first complicated item, I think, when it comes to Satisfactory. The rest are pretty easy up until now, and this is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting, because we're going to be dealing with multiple resources. We'll have 4 going in to produce heavy modular frames, and we're also going to have to worry about belt speeds as well. So we're going to save that probably for the next episode, and then we have the new space elevator parts that we're going to unlock. Today we will sort out computers, as expanding our logistics network is going to make everything else easier for us. With that out the way, the next thing that we're going to need to do is to start setting up the train line. But before we do that, I will give you a basic rundown as to my plan for the computers. In this area, we're currently only using 240 oil. And for this build, we're going to use 240 oil more. So we're going to tap, I think, probably this oil node over here. That's a normal node, so we may have to overclock it. The other alternative is that we could combine it with that normal node as well. That will give us the 240 crude oil that we need per minute. And we're going to try and build it in this little space between the train tracks here. I think it will look really nice to have the factory within that space, and then seeing the trains run along the side. On top of this, I'm going to run another train line, which will bring the copper from all the way over there. There's a pure node behind this little rock, and so we're going to extract that and bring it all the way across to here. And it's just going to be a push-pull line for now, though we may change it to a dual line later on. As the plan is to produce computers for us to use, we don't need to build them en masse. We can just let them slowly store away in our storage facility. So for this, we're going to look at a small factory. We're only going to produce 5 computers per minute. And then if we need more, we can obviously do a facility specifically for computers en masse later on. The first port of call is obviously trains, and we need to set up a line that will get the resources from over there. And I've decided we're going to play around with the height a little bit. So I'm going to build the train line above this one. It's always easy to forget in Satisfactory that we can play around with verticality, and that is exactly what we're going to be doing with this. So we're going to place this that's 2 meters above the train station. It's going to clip in just a tiny little bit. And then with that done, we're now going to place the train station just on top. We want it to be against the edge here. Now for this episode, we only need to bring in copper. We don't need any of the resources. So for that, we're just going to place a single freight station down. I'm going to rename this station Computer Copper Drop. With that done, we now need to connect power to this network. And the easiest way, given that the train station below us is directly below us, we should be able to just run that straight down like so. And then from here, we're going to be able to use our blueprint that we developed in the last episode. In fact, let's add an empty station here in case we want to upgrade this later on. But from here, we will add our blueprint that we designed in the last episode. So let's go with the straight rail. If you wanted, you could design a single foundation line. It can look great, but because we may consider upgrading this later on, we're going to keep with a 2 foundation wide track. From here, we're going to blueprint all the way over to there. So I'm going to now jump over to the other camp and you can see us do it really quickly. I've just noticed that if I try and curve around this cliffside, I like to hug my cliffsides. We're going to clip later on, which means we have to go straight and then curve again, which I don't really like to do. So for here, I'm going to place another blueprint down, but I want to stress that when you're using blueprints, you don't have to stick with them the whole time. You can adjust your rail lines or any blueprint that you create as you see fit to hopefully get a better fit for you. So here I'm just removing the second half of it. And from here, if we grab our left curve, we should be able to snap it onto it and then use the continued curve afterwards to hopefully, if all goes to plan, curve around that section of the rock. I always feel when doing these designs for the rails, if you can do one long curve, it looks so much better than doing multiple curves and straight sections. And here we are. We are also just about out of resources, funnily enough, but our copper node that we need is just there. And we can now, we grab, do we have enough for one more? We go with the lemon typical. Well, I'm going to have to go back and get more resources. But what we'll do is place a straight section here, grab those resources and set up a train line back. And we're back with some resources. And this has brought up actually a little predicament, because if we drop down, you'll notice if I bring the foundation across to here and then we hold control over here, we are off the grid. We're off the world grid now because we've been building from the train line, and the curves mean that you go away from the grid as you place them. So we have two options. We can either do the trick that I covered in the last episode to connect merge these two grids together, and then we can have our miner, we'll just place down here for now, bring the resources onto this grid and across. Or the other option is to, rather than use the world grid, if you connect all of your facilities by the rail, then you can always run the facilities in line with the rail sections, because you'll never have to merge back on. They'll be their independent grids, but always merging onto the rail line that you build. And I think that's what we're going to do for this one, because your miners are never going to be aligned to the world grid. You can do various tips and tricks to get the outputs to align perfectly, but they will never be aligned to the world grid unless that comes in 1.1. So the next thing that we're going to do is just clear out the excess foliage here, and then make sure that we have the copper come out, not too far off the grid. That's perfect. We only need 120 and our Mark II belt will bring the resources for us. So let's set up the train now. So the train is going to be a push-pull system, which means, if you remember rightly from last episode, we talked briefly about it, your stations need to be facing the opposite directions. So for us, this station is going to be heading out, and the other station, which we've already placed, is in the opposite direction. Let's place that there. Grab our freight platform. If you can't place it, if it's an illegal placement, normally it's because there's not enough space underneath them. What you can do is snap it into that place, press H to lock it, and you'll see that it magically becomes placeable. For now, we'll keep it as a Mark II line. There's no need for us to bring more resources. We can obviously upgrade this as and when we need it later on. And then we will bring the power across to there. I don't really want it to clip through the station, so what I will probably do is run this down to here and then run it underneath all the way across to the miner. So I'll get this done really quickly, and then after that we'll set the rail up. I won't show you the placing of the rail. We did that all in the last episode. So instead I'll meet you back at the oil facility. Okay, before we get back, I thought it probably best to set up a 2-line system rather than a single line, even if we're using push-pull, because it's a perfect opportunity to demonstrate how the... Ooh, I didn't think that through. So you can't split from a train station. You have to have a segment first, which may be a little problematic for us. So we can do it there. Let's push this one back and see if that works. But I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to show you how to use signals for a push-pull system with 2 lines. So we're going to have a fork at the end heading into here, and we will do some signaling once we've unlocked the signals. But for now, I'm going to run this line all the way back, and I will meet you, as promised, at the oil facility. You can see we've now brought the rail line all the way back to the base. I've also added some supports underneath and a little walkway just to get up to the train station, as it's just a little bit too high. But there is plenty of space for a train underneath as well, and we may even play around with the decoration of this later on. I have this kind of idea for a diagonal piece. In fact, I'll quickly play around with that now. So what I want to do, if we just grab a painted beam, I'm going to place it in the center edge there, and we're going to, just in freeform mode, bring it all the way across to this one. We're going to do the same. We're going to bring this all the way back up to that position. And as you can see, these are merged. It's the same system that we did for merging the grid here, but on a diagonal. And the important thing with this is we can now add, if we wanted to, maybe a large concrete pillar. Let's see how that looks from afar. Yeah, if I do this on both sides, it might look quite good. Maybe even bring it slightly closer in. But I'm not going to work any more on this because we will need to take the computers out of a train station or freight station just there. So these might clip, and I don't want that. So we'll leave that there just as a thought for me later on, but we'll see if it's actually useful a little bit later. Next thing that we need to do is bring the copper down. It's going to run across to here probably, and then down into the facility. But before I do that, I need to fill this out with concrete. The easiest way that we can fill this in is by using our blueprints. It's the quickest way to do it and will save you a lot of time. Just make sure you're in blueprint mode when you set them up. And if they're a different material, change the material to concrete if you use concrete a lot, or just paint them manually afterwards. Anyway, I'm going to do the rest of this area, and then once we're done, we'll get started on the build. I don't really want to go into too many complex build techniques because I don't want to confuse you. But you're probably, or some of you might be wondering, what would we do here if we want to blend these in? The easiest thing that you can do if you're trying to blend curves into grids would be to have something like a block here, and then to just place these normally and ensure that nothing pops out this side. That would be the cleanest way to do it. Another way that you can do it would be to snap the foundation to the edge here, and providing they're on the same height like this, you can then place these. But the problem is that you're going to be spending a lot of time trying to get these to blend together. And then even then we need to do a load of nudging to make sure that it doesn't poke through. So it really does come down to your own personal preference. I'm probably going to just remove the metal supports here and in their place add these foundations. That's going to take me a few minutes, so we'll be back shortly to get started on the build.
A few moments later.
The facility is now prepared. The next thing that I want to do is make sure that we have the freight station placed down for the computers to go in once they're done, and then bring the copper down and the oil across that we're going to be using for this facility. This will be easy enough, just replacing. Remember, we can press H, and this will automatically connect once you do that, so that the train that you have set will continue to run the scheduled line. This is going to be the input line, so it's going to be loaded in. And from here, what we can do, if we plan for it, maybe we can push this line back so that it's actually in line here. And then this rubber line will become the line for our computers. So I'm going to really quickly add the third station here. It shouldn't affect the train line unless the train's at the station it's path to and is trying to direct itself to this train station. In which case you may have an issue and you may have to redo it, but it should be fine. But from here, we need to work out where we can bring the computers in. And I think our best bet will be to run it alongside these and use this outer line for the computers, and then move the rubber over to the center line because we've got all of this space. We can do that over here without any issues. So that will be the plan for the logistics of that. And from here, we can now bring the copper down. You can see the line there for the copper. Is that in line? I think it is. So we'll bring it up to that level and then run that across. Yeah, that's in line. Fantastic. And that's going to come down to here, where it will be distributed into the facility. Just wondering, I'm going to quickly unlock, just to clean this up a little bit, I'm going to go across to architecture. We're going to unlock this frame pillar set. So we'll just add that there, buy that. And from here, we're going to enclose the conveyor. You don't need to do this. It's just something that I like to do on my elevators. I'm going to run that all the way to the top, and you'll notice when we have copper coming down, it will fit nicely in the center. And you can, if you want, do it along here. So to do it horizontally, hold Control so you get better placement, and then you're going to just drag it across like so. Makes it look a little bit more structured. And if we want to adjust this, we can place that there, and then we just need to snap it to the elevator. And there we go. Right, that is copper done. That is the computer done. Let's move on to oil. The oil is just behind here, but I want to bring it through here. And if we grab a pipeline support, you'll notice that it's about the same height as the rails. So we can either just build through here if you don't mind the clipping, like so, or we could, if you want to still keep the top section, if we went to a, say, a 1 meter. Oh, come on, man. We'll do it here for the example. We grab a 1 meter and snap this here, and then we bring this down so that the rail line will come into, well, down into this section, wherever we want it, so that it goes underneath the actual track. And you can remove that and have it as some kind of gap. Personally, I'm happy with flipping the pipes through walls. So that's what we're going to do for this. We're going to make sure on the other side we have a line for it to go to. So I'm going to bring it to the straight point. It'll be there. Then we're going to run this along. Again, how you do this is really up to you. This is just one option. And then all we need to do is run this along to here. So we'll grab our oil extractor and bring the... You have got to be kidding me, mate. From here, we can connect it like so. The last thing we need to do is connect this to power. We've got the perfect support for power lines. We can just run this all the way along and then find somewhere to connect it up to the facility. Or in fact, what we could do, if we bring it across to here, we have this section here. We could connect the power between the train lines and then connect this to the little power nub over here. For this facility, we do need 240 crude oil per minute. So we're going to overclock this, which will use up more power, but it'll be worth it. And the other thing that we need to do is set up the train line now, because we don't actually have a train going back and forth along here, bringing the copper that we're going to need. But let's make sure it's set to unload. And then from here, we're going to have a locomotive followed by a freight cart and then another locomotive. One thing that I didn't think to do was make sure that we had enough space between the junction and the freight station the other side. So I'm going to have to check that. But from here, we can jump into this, go to edit timetable, and we're going to do computer copper drop and then copper pickup. Save changes and then turn on the self-driving train. And so long as there's a train locomotive pathing in the direction of both stations, so one going forwards, one going back, this should run perfectly. So it's docked there, we've got nothing, so it's going to immediately allow us to move on. There we go. And now it's going to take us to the other train station, collect that copper that we need, and then it'll drop it off over here. And then we'll be able to get started building the facility. And the answer is no, we do not have enough space. So I'm going to have to adjust this rail line quickly as well. But don't worry, I'll sort that later. Anyway, back to the oil facility. With the concrete covered, we're now able to get started on the factory layout. I'm also going to provide the top-down view of this as well, so you're going to be able to see everything. I will also break this down at the end from the overhead so that you can see how everything works out. We're going to get started now with 8 refineries. These are all going to be placed along the top here. They're going to take that crude oil and we're going to turn that into heavy oil residue. There are better alternative recipes for this, but as I've mentioned previously, because we're trying to keep this as open and available to everyone, we're going to start off with vanilla recipes, and then occasionally, if it's absolutely pressing, we will talk about the alternate recipes. Now, because these are turning the oil into heavy oil residue, we don't need to worry about a solid input. So we can just grab our pipe joint here and run this as a manifold all the way down. One thing to be aware of with the liquids is you want to ensure that all the pipes that you use are the same tier. So don't mix tier 2s and tier 1 pipes because it can be quite buggy. Try and keep all of your pipe tiers the same. So either use all tier 1s or all tier 2s when you have access to that. Each of these are going to be set to the goodness me, I had a bit of a brain fart then. So we're going to set all of these to the plastic with the heavy oil residue output, which means we'll have 80 heavy oil residue to play around with and 160 plastic. So we're just going to copy and paste the recipe as we have previously using Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V. On the output side, we're going to add our conveyor lifts, have them all facing the same direction forwards. And then we're going to have mergers. These are going to be facing to the left of the grid for the first 3 on the right hand side. And then one facing, the fourth one facing down the grid. And then the rest we're gonna take across to here. Next we need to worry about the heavy oil residue. I'm going to place it a little bit further out so that you can see the pipe work a little bit better. We're going to run all of these in a manifold. And of course we will be color coding these as well afterwards. Next we'll bring all of the plastic to the middle and also to the end mergers. Like so, and that's ready for the time being. We can place a conveyor here just so that we know that we're going to send these resources across, and the plastic we can do the same here as well. At this point we're going to get started on the copper, which we have here. For this we're going to want 4 smelters. I think we can place them here. We've got plenty of space in this build, so I'm not too afraid of running them along their own foundation, but you can place them close together if you want. And we're going to need the Mark II belt for that. Now with this section, the easiest way that we can probably bring them together would be to bring this across to about here, and then bringing that down. That might not look too good. Let's try pushing that back ever so slightly. This is going to be a little bit of trial and error. I'm not sure what's happening there. Probably go straight down. Normally I prefer using lifts, but I think that'll work for this particular build. I'm going to set all of these to copper ingots, and then from here we need to merge these all together. And we're using the Mark II belts because these are going to have 120 copper ingots. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. And then from here, we're going to have to split this 2-to-1. So we're going to need 40 of the ingots to go to a wire line, and then we're going to need 80 ingots to a copper sheet line. So copper sheet needs 80. So how we do this split is we're going to add a merger. So we're going to send 2 of the outputs to this one. And we're going to send a third out in this direction. So from here, we're splitting the 120 in 3. So that's 40 on each of the outputs. And because we're merging 2 of those, that's 80 on this side, 40 on this, which does mean this is going to have to be a Mark II belt. And then over here, we're going to run our wire line. So for this, we're going to split between 3 constructors. And this needs to be, well, one of these needs to be underclocked to 66.7. I think we can do the middle one with that one. So that should use 10, and then the others 15 each. That's nice. Then on the other side, and we have to consider the amount of resources that we got. So 20 plus 60, that's 80. We're going to need to use at least a Mark II belt. We're going to actually, rather than merge them all together, let's split this one between the two. So each line will have 40 on it. And then in front of each of these, we're going to place another constructor. And these are going to be running at 20 per minute, so 66.667 each. Now I know this might be confusing, but we do have the top-down view to help, but also at the end, again, I will be showing you the overlay of it all. Next, let's add our manufacturers. So we're going to place 2 of these. We want, I'm going to actually add 1 refinery just here. Don't worry too much about that one just yet. And then we're going to have the 2 manufacturers next to it. They should fit in. So the manufacturers are obviously going to be set to computers. And as you can see, this requires 3 inputs. We don't need to use all 4. And we will merge them there. And then returning to this refinery, going to run this straight along. This is going to be turning that heavy oil residue into residual fuel. It's not going to be running at 100%. We're going to need to overclock this to 133.33333% clock speed. In fact, let's just go with 134. There's going to be no harm in this. We're just going to burn it all off over with the generators over there. And I should also mention, I'm going to bring all of that heavy oil residue down from, I guess over here will do. I'm going to leave that there for now because we're going to build here next. But before we do that, just really quickly, let's sort out these inputs. So one set of cable is going to go in here, the other over here. Then we're also going to need to sort out the plastic. We're going to run this, I think, on top. I think it's going to be better for us. So let's grab that again. Put these up. Oh, kind of like that little support. One line is going to run on top of the logistics that we've just done. Bring that down and send that straight into that input. So now if we look here, you can see we've got our plastic and our cable for this one, and we're now going to grab the plastic from over here, and likewise we're going to bring the plastic down here and then run that all the way around the second input. Last but not least, we have the circuit boards. This is going to take the copper ingots from here and run them to a constructor line. In fact, if we want to keep this clear, we can do by having a elevator here, and then sending that across to keep it in line with this. Here we're going to have 4 constructors. And these are just running as a manifold, leading straight into each of the inputs. And these are going to be producing the copper sheets that we're going to be needing at 100%, ready for our assemblers. Now we're going to need a total of 3 assemblers here. Might be better doing 2, thinking about it. We're going to place 1 here, and we're going to use overclocking. Now we're going to place the second one here. Okay, now that they're connected, we'll set these 2 circuit boards. We're actually going to need to overclock them to 100 and 133.333, or you can just set down here and per minute. Also, you may not have noticed that when I copy and pasted, it does copy and paste the overclock as well. I'm going to keep this section clear as a walkway. And the last thing we need to do is bring the plastic from this section. We're going to run it all the way across to splitter. And there we go. That is the layout done. I just need to run around and connect all of the power up. I'm not going to do any decorating and designing. Maybe I'll do some outside of this video, but we're just going to get this up and running. And then once that's done, we'll move on to talking briefly about signals. I've now turned everything on, but I had a slight oversight. I forgot to hook up the heavy oil residue. So we're now doing that really quickly. I'm just going to run that all the way down to the end, like so. And that should work. How much is it? Yeah, 80. Fantastic. That can go there. So now we have a facility. It's running by the looks of it. We've got our circuit boards, our plastic, our cable. So here are our computers. They're running along here and heading straight into the third station. One thing that I haven't thought about doing is actually setting up the train station over at the base. So let's quickly head over and do that. And actually, before then, we should do an overview. And here we are with the working facility. So fingers crossed this is going to be pretty easy for you to understand as we break it down now. But we're going to start off as we did with the build with the 8 refineries in the top right-hand section. They're producing the plastic with the heavy oil residue byproduct. And that heavy oil residue is all being merged along a manifold and run down to the refinery in the very bottom left-hand corner, which is producing the fuel. It's the residual fuel recipe. And then the plastic is being split into 2 sections. So the first 4 on the right-hand side are sending their plastic across to the circuit board assemblers. And then the other 4 are sending their plastic to the manufacturers. Next, we have the copper production. We have 4 smelters in the top, just to the left of the refineries that we've placed. And they are sending their copper ingots between 2 different sets of production lines. We have 66, or 2/3 of the resources going to the copper sheet line, which is the 4 constructors below the refineries, which are then sending their copper sheets between the 2 assemblers. And then to the left of this, we have 3 constructors producing the copper wire, and then they're merging and splitting to send the resources between 2 constructors producing a cable. All of those resources, the circuit boards and the cable, are heading to the manufacturers to produce a total of 5 computers per minute. And whilst we're here, the fuel that we're producing at the refinery is being run all the way along the crude pipeline where the refineries were placed for the previous plastic and rubber build to our merging line of the residual fuel and producing power for us. Speaking of which, we're producing 53 fuel extra at the moment. With the 53 extra fuel, that means we can actually upgrade this now to run an extra 2.5 generators from that. So we're going to make use of that now by placing them along this manifold. To expand this, we're just going to run 2 of these, and then on the end, let's see if we're lucky. If we press H, does that work? Yes. Fantastic. So we'll place just 1 joint in front of them and connect these together. With us producing a considerably larger amount of power now, that's an extra between 500 and 750 megawatts. We can now go and sort out the storage for the computers, and then from there we'll start with the signals. And this is going to be easily done. We just need to remove that 1 platform, swap this out for a freight platform, make sure it's set to unload. And then from here, we're going to grab our conveyor floor hole, connect these up, head underneath, and we will bring this down this one, we're going to have to go this way around. All the way to our storage facility over there that we worked on in the last episode. Would you look at this? We've got tons of resources, which means there's an actual problem. Presumably, I haven't catered for the awesome sync speed. So we're going to have to either upgrade our belts or, failing that, add another awesome sync. As cool as it is seeing all your resources along a bus. Oh, it would help if it was powered. We all make mistakes. Wonderful. Right, so we need to place this a foundation apart. Add our smart splitter. The left one is overflow. We should have a fast enough belt speed for this line. We can always upgrade it if we need to. Get a few more of these so that we can set up our dimensional depot for this. And there we go. The computers are now connected to the storage network. And the next time the train comes, we should be able to see the computers running along there. So now all we need to do is wait to unlock signals, which will probably take, we're doing 5 per minute, and I think we need 50. That'll be 10 minutes. So I'll see you in a few minutes. I just want to quickly mention, there was a few comments in the last video that was talking about why I wasn't using buffers. Now you can see the train there has just left and the resources are flowing in without any issues. You do not need buffers, industrial buffers, if you only have a small amount of resources coming through. Though, if you're going to be producing lots of resources, then you will want to consider buffers, because what may happen is that during the loading phase, your lines fill up with resources because they can't load into the train station, and that will go all the way back into your factory. But generally speaking, it's not that big a thing. It just means you get less resources. We're going to head back over to the storage now because I think we'll have some computers heading in. And don't worry if I just confused you about talking about the industrial buffers. Those that were asking about it, that was the answer in regards to that, but we will cover using industrial buffers later on for your stations to maintain their efficiency. I should actually remove some of the resources from these lines, because if there's still a carriage full, which there is, the resources are going to be mixed on that freight. So I'm going to sort that out once we see the computers, which are coming along now. Gives me something to do for the next 3 minutes, because that ain't 50. That's probably what, 20, 30? About 30. Oh, but isn't it lovely? Seeing the resources coming along. Very nice. This is exactly the problem we didn't want. We've sent the resources to the wrong section. What we can do, seeing as we've got them on here, knowing that the first two here are the plastic and rubber lines, we can just go to the storage and set them so it's only motors and encased industrial beams. So we're at the storage. This is the motor. Because it's full, we're not actually sending any rubber to here at the moment, but if we set this to motors specifically, we won't have that issue by mixing the belts. So good to know. Same with this one we've just done. Encased industrial beams means all of these are going to be sent along here, and we can help our line run smoothly because it's still getting through the sheer bottleneck of resources by just removing a couple of these on each of the storage units so that less items are coming through here. Now that the commotion is sorted out, we can unlock railway signaling. That will be the 50, 400 and 1000. Do we have that? Yes, we do. No, we typical. We're 11 short. Okay, let's grab, put it in there. There we go. So now we've unlocked signaling. We're going to need to talk about that very quickly. For this little demonstration, we're going to be talking about the signals, but I am going to be flying because it's quite difficult to show off what's happening if I'm not actually above, because you need to see, if we just grab a block signal really quickly, we need to see the overlay on the rail lines, and this can only be shown if we have a signal available. A block signal firstly dictates the travel. If I quickly place a block signal here, this train will not be able to pass through because it's dictating that the train is going to pass through with the signal on the right hand side. So this train won't be able to leave because it has to go through this block signal. And as you can see here, if we quickly look on the map, we have a little warning sign from the train saying signals are making the next stop unreachable. However, a block signal can be placed on both sides of the line. And oh, there goes the giraffe tick bean. But now you can see that because we have a signal here, it's allowing the train to travel along this line. However, it's stopped, and that's because these are looping into themselves. We don't need to worry too much about that, but if I place this here, we've now separated the track into two blocks. And the problem here, this is actually another great opportunity to show you. If we show the overlay, we now have two blocks. We have a red block between these and an orange block. Now, a block signal will only allow a train to pass if the block in front of it is empty. Unfortunately, in this circumstance, because this line hasn't been blocked, it's all one big block. This whole network, if we fly really quickly, you can see it's all turning orange. And because of that, the block signal sees this block is occupied because the tail end is in the same block. So in this circumstance, we could just place one here as a reference, and you'll see it should allow the train to pass. So the important thing with block signals is that they look at the block in front of them, and if it's empty, they will allow trains to pass through. We're not going to talk about path signals today. I don't think there's really any necessity for that, but we are going to ensure that all of our trains are traveling in the right direction. You don't need lots of block signals, at least when you're starting out. But I like to always have a block signal before junctions, and we're going to do this all the way along the track occasionally. And you'll see that as we do this, we're separating the track into more blocks. On this, we're going to place signals all along the right hand side in this direction and the same in this direction. And then once we've done that, I'm going to talk about a little technique that you can use with your signals as well to help you when it comes to creating junctions. Oh, here's another great opportunity. So if we grab our block signal here, I'm going to place one on this track and one on that one. And remember how the signals dictate the direction of travel? Well, now when this train drops off the copper, what we're going to see is that the train is going to take the right-hand lane to head back along there. This means that even with a push-pull system, you can set up lines like this so that you can have multiple trains using the push-pull along a single line, or dual line, I should say. There we go. Wonderful. Well, I can safely say that I have blocked everything now, so we should now head to the junction. And here we are at the roundabout that we did in the last episode. We're going to rework this now because it's a little bit inefficient. Any train that comes along here cannot go to this segment because we don't have enough segments on the track. We have to work with the quarter circles, whereas we need to have eighths really. So in this case, if this train runs along this track and wants to go up here, it actually has to go into the roundabout all the way around to go up there. So we're going to rework this now. I'm just going to remove these segments, and here we have 4 quarters. So one there, 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 and here. The problem is that we can only join over in this segment. Really, we need a way to merge in this segment here. Unfortunately, it's a little bit difficult, though you can do it, to set up a circle like that. However, you may not have a perfect 8th. However, in that case, I think I've done a pretty good job with that. Remember, you can also press H so that you can merge and split from the same segment. But another thing that you can do, which will make your life just a little bit easier, is if you find, let's add these signals here, if you find the middle segment roughly, which is about in line with this here, we can place a signal down, and what this has done is create on this segment of line a split. Even if we delete this now, we still have this split, which means we can easily connect the rails to these segments. It's really useful to do, makes life so much easier, and I highly recommend using that when you're trying to connect your train lines together. Alright, so, and then all we need to do, coming back out of this, would be to remove the extra signals on the roundabout. We really don't need them. Just lock into a junction and you should be fine. You have particularly high throughput, or it's a complex junction, you may want to use pathing signals. We're going to leave that out for this one. But guys, we are going to leave it there. I hope you found this episode useful. Let me know what you'd like us to cover in the next episode, whether that's decorating or heavy modular frames, or maybe going more in depth with power. But special thanks, as always, goes to all of our amazing supporters on Patreon, most notably our Lunar Eclipse patrons, Firefless, The Calamity, Ben, Star, and Seeker Kala, as well as our Blood Moon of the day, which today is Irate Monk. Until next time, as always, ciao for now.